Jennifer was failing to do her homework. Her teacher called Jennifer's folks to solicit help, but her parents could not help. 12-year-old Jennifer would not obey them. Jennifer was not under their authority. They had hoped that school would provide the direction and motivation that they had not been able to provide for their daughter. This story is not unusual. By age 10 to 12, scores of children have already left home. I am not referring to the tragic Times Square kids in New York City or your community. I refer to the numbers of children who, by 10 to 12, have effectively left mom or dad as an authority or reference point in their lives. Our culture has lost its way with respect to parenting. We are a rudderless ship without a compass. We lack both a sense of direction and the capacity to direct our lives. This is an excerpt from Shepherding a Child's Heart by Ted Tripp.
Well, welcome back to The Pilgrim's Way. It's good to be here with you guys. We've got everybody but Kyle, I almost said Kyle. Kyle is here.
I'm right here.
It's usually Kyle, but now it's Andy.
Yeah.
Andy's gone. So, no, but it's good to be here. We're talking about, in this episode, parenting young children.
Mm-hmm.
And really we want to focus, I think, on the parents. Like what are some healthy practices for you to do? Not only in your own life, your own spiritual life, physical life, but also in how you're raising your kids. So, I don't know, Kyle, where do you want to start?
Well, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear you?
No, I cannot hear myself.
I can fix that.
All right. That's all right. I think as we were talking earlier, this idea of giving grace to each other as parents is it's essential in a marriage. Thank you. Yeah, now I can hear myself. But as I was thinking about this topic, I thought about just all the grace that, or the courtesy and respect that we should give to our spouses when we are raising children is critical. Now, again, I'm kind of the odd guy out here. Patty and I do not have biological children, but I was thought back to the story of that gave me some guidance as I began to grow older in Samuel of Elkanah and Hannah, and how he loved her so very much, even though she could not have children. And then he continued not to belittle her, which I think, if I remember correctly, that was kind of the norm in that time. If you could not bear children as a woman, you were seen as less than.
Yeah.
You had no value because that was your major purpose, was reproduction and bearing children. But yet he did not treat her as something that was less than. He blessed her doubly because he loved her and extended grace to her. And then, of course, out of that, we receive the blessing of the prophet Samuel. But just this concept of understanding that I don't have all the answers. I'm not going to be perfect as a parent, but I need to work alongside my spouse to allow her or him, whichever the case may be, and if you're a lady listening, extending grace to your husband and vice versa, guys, girls, that this is a partnership that is mirrored in the image of Christ. So this graciousness is one that we need to really firmly grasp and to embody within our lives.
Yeah, we whenever we were kind of sitting down to figure out what are we going to talk about in this next year, we thought about this one because we have so many young families coming to our church now.
Right.
I think there's about to be a baby boom as well.
Oh my, yes.
So this is
praise God.
Yeah. So this is a much needed topic for us personally. I have a young son, about to have another daughter, and so this one is one that I've thought about a lot. As my wife and I have tried to figure out the rhythm of parenting, but also continuing to love each other well. One of the biggest obstacles to that is like sleepless nights, like not getting good rest, oftentimes not getting good nourishment, like just good food, because you've had a super long day and everything that could have went wrong.
Yeah.
So let's go order something to eat, and that pattern gives way to to being quick tempered, especially for younger guys. Like that's a sin that young men are prone to. Paul speaks against that several times. And so being quick tempered with your wife, I think, Phil, you've talked about this before, but like the people that are closest to you are the people you hurt most often. And that's going to be immediately your wife or your husband. And so when you have this pattern of sleepless nights, and then all of a sudden things start popping up, and you're expecting her to deal with it or him to deal with it, and they don't, and so now you're more angry and bitter. One principle that I've tried to, imperfectly, but tried to embody is extending grace. Like, I don't know what happened in her day, all throughout the day. I don't know what happened. So whenever I get home, I shouldn't make assumptions that, she didn't do this or this or this, or, I should just extend some mercy, be merciful, if that makes sense. So,
yeah, I think a mistake I made early was thinking that my marriage would be, that the roles in my family would be the same as in my parents' relationship. My mom loved to cook, and she did all the cooking. My wife doesn't like to cook, and so at first it was a real struggle, because I just had this false expectation of what life would be like, and we had to figure out a new normal. And eventually I realized I enjoy cooking, and so it makes more sense for me to do the cooking. It's not that she never cooks, but there has to be a recognition that we both come into a marriage with a set of expectations that they're not absolutes, like they have to be adhered to. You guys need to have a conversation about your relationship. There's no such thing as man's work and woman's work. There's just work that needs to be done. And so who does what, or you do it together, or you have to talk about those kinds of things and recognize your tendencies are flowing from how you were raised and what examples that you saw before you. But to take it back to the sleepless nights, like let's be practical here. What if that's where you're struggling? What are some things that you can do to help? One, I think, don't be afraid to leave your child with your parents, or if you don't have access to parents that are healthy, that you feel like are safe to leave your child with. There's people within the church that are safe. That can be. Steph and I have never really lived close to our families because of the ministry, and so we had kind of surrogate grandparents in each church that we've been to. And if it weren't for those precious saints, we would have had a real struggle, because we needed people. You need to give your children to other people so that you can rest. And I don't think it's wise to never go away without your. I think when you always have to keep your kids with you, I don't think it's good for your marriage. You need time where you sleep. You need time where you can be intimate. You need time where you can just breathe for a little bit, because kids are taxing, and if you don't have a break, it's really unhealthy. And sometimes the only way you're going to get that break, depending on what's going on with your child, if they've got a medical issue where they don't sleep, or you're going to have to figure out rhythms of, I sleep during these hours and you sleep during these hours, so that we can maximize until we get to the end of this stretch. Or ask for help, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Where someone comes in and gives you a break.
Yeah, I've got kind of an example to tag on to that. I know of some people with children that, one of the biggest battles is who's going to get up when the child needs something in the night. Who's going to get up? Well, this couple finally figured out that one of them, I won't say which one it was, one of them did not do well getting up and trying to return back to sleep, while the other one could just wonderfully wake up and then take care of whatever need it was, and 2 minutes after hitting the pill, they were out again. Yeah. So they, instead of this negativity and blame and jealousy of, well, you never get up, they finally said, you know what, you're the one that can do this. I can't go back to sleep after it. You're going to be the one that gets up in the night, but I will take care of things on the other side of it early in the morning. I'm the one that wakes up. Yep. You stay in bed longer. I will take care of the child early. Yep. Just that graciousness of figuring out your schedule, and what works for you individually was, fabulous for them.
Yeah.
And so they continued on in that, and it worked great.
Yeah, I think communication is the key, is being able to talk to each other about that without getting defensive or without
anger and and bitterness. Yeah, you mentioned bitterness earlier there, Chris.
Sleeplessness produces stress, and stress produces anger and bitterness and all that other stuff. So, you've got to get sleep. So you've got to figure it out. Whether
you've also got to move. We're embodied souls, and so like daily exercise, going on walks, whatever it is also, it's been a huge help to me. And like part of it is because when I don't do something physical, like I sit in an office all day, and if I don't, then I have a harder time falling asleep. And so anyway,
one more thing on sleeplessness, I would just say you should not let your children sleep with you.
No.
And I know that it's tempting when you can't get any sleep to just let them stay in the bed with you, because then maybe they'll sleep a little bit. Now, there are moments where, like I remember when my oldest daughter was an infant and she had RSV, and so she had to be propped up, and so we had to have her right there between us. But generally, we kind of made a promise early on that kids were not going to get in the bed with us. And I think that does a couple of things. Because once you open that door, it doesn't really close without weeping and gnashing of teeth. And so making them sleep in their own beds, being kind of hard-nosed about that, will produce rich dividends later, especially when it regards to intimacy and things like that. Because if you're allowing kids in your bed, that's going to compound the intimacy problem that's already there because of sleeplessness and exhaustion and things like that. So...
Yeah. So going back to something you mentioned earlier, the expectation side, made me think of something that's kind of a little bit off topic, but maybe still in the same vein that Doug and I were talking about a couple days ago, regarding romance novels. So Doug, I'm gonna kick it over. I'm gonna kick it over to you.
This is exactly what I thought we'd talk about.
Why
today.
should Christians be very careful with what they're reading, especially concerning romance novels?
Yes. So I had a wonderful professor at SBU, and he was in his 80s when I don't know how he was still teaching, but
hey now,
and he was
hey, I'm approaching that.
You're like SBU
40?
retirement, but wonderful Christian man, and he wanted to encourage us, and so it was a group of young pastors in training, and he would talk about his struggles with pornography, and we would all imagine like our own struggles and like the modern image, but he was talking about going to the docks, and he would buy like these little books, and they would be just like dirty jokes or limericks or stories and things like this. And I remember thinking at the time, man, like written word, like we're not talking about the same struggle here, buddy. But as I grew in my understanding, I saw actually that is an entrance, and this is all part of a slippery slope. So somebody who feels like, well, I'm reading this story, but it's not leading me towards things that people who struggle with a pornography addiction normally deal with, realize it is a fantasy. You are giving your heart to something. You may be emotionally involved in the story, and it can be just as dangerous and deadly as pornography as we know it today in the 21st century. And so the Paul is very clear: guard your hearts against all sexual immorality. And I think that's an appropriate application, that it's kind of fantasized sexual immorality, or maybe it's just relational, but it still causes you to have affections for a character that are stronger than they should be.
Or it creates bitterness in you that your spouse doesn't treat you the way that.
Yeah, that's right.
It's in a false expectation, which the visual porn industry does that too. They create a sexual experience that's not a normal sexual experience.
That's right.
And so then you've conditioned yourself to think that's what sexual intimacy is. and it's very different from that. The same thing happens with these novels, and I think men can be just as guilty as women. Women read those kind of romance novels, but a lot of times the action books or the spy books or they'll have sexual scenes in them that are just as racy and just as terrible as in those romance novels.
Right.
So I think you have to very clearly guard your heart. I don't think you should be watching. You should not set unclean things before your eyes and ears. Whether it's a movie, a TV show, or a book, or a magazine or a website that is enticing you to immorality of one kind or another, or creating unrealistic expectations of what intimacy with your spouse would be like.
Yeah, that's really what I wanted to get at, is these false expectations, and the church in the last couple of decades has been very loud about pornography proper, like on devices or something like that, but really pretty quiet about this subtle form of pornography, which is in romance novels. Not all romance novels are like this, but they can lead you to these false expectations, which creates in your marriage a bitterness because she's not like that, or he's not as romantic as this character was.
I think we've kind of strayed away from our point here.
Yeah. Sorry, went down a rabbit trail there.
Yeah.
The false expectations just made me think of a conversation that I had. I don't know what are we talking about?
Children, parenting small children. So not sure how we got to
we were talking about
we were talking about intimacy. Yeah.
Marriage.
So let's steer ship back towards where we're going. Let's talk about obedience. I think that's one of the biggest struggles. That's what the book that Doug read early on kind of was highlighting, is this rejection of authority. And I think that people think that it happens when they become teenagers. The reality, it doesn't. They come out of the womb with a sinful nature, and if you have a toddler, you can begin to see that when the sin starts spilling out of their heart. But they're very selfish. They don't want to share anything. They don't want to listen. They want to say no. And the problem is they're really cute sometimes when they're sinning. And so you laugh at them and you realize it's not that big a deal. But the problem is when you do not start to discipline selfishness and greed and anger and fit throwing. Fit throwing is just anger. It's just allowing them to express anger sinfully. When you allow those things to continue because it's cute or because you don't want to spend the time to consistently and immediately discipline each occurrence, you're teaching them to disobey rather than teaching them to obey.
Yeah, you're saying it's okay for you to do this, and in fact, I'm going to reward you for it by letting you get your way.
Yeah, that's right. And everything you do is teaching them to obey or to disobey. Everything. And you say, well, that's exhausting. It absolutely is. I mean, but that's the more you invest on the front end, the less you have to invest on the back end. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times it's easier to just let it go now, but then that creates such havoc later. So you either choose to deny yourself now and reap the reward of a healthy young adult as they grow up, or you can do what's easy for you now, and then their life goes into unrestrained sin later.
Yeah, a really practical example of this is concerning food. We've been working on this with my son. Lexi and I have, he had lunch. He's well fed. You can look at him and see that he's a little bit chubby. He's not starving, but he'll want something else. He'll want more. He'll want a slice of cheese or a strawberry or banana or something. And it's like, yeah, it wouldn't be wrong for me to give him this banana, but this might be an opportunity for him to learn. You don't always just get whatever you want. Yeah. You actually have to learn that sometimes you need to say no to your body. Yeah. Because if you consistently just give your kids whatever they want when they want it, especially around food, you're going to cultivate a very, very unhealthy habit for them later in life, whether it be morbidly obese.
I think another issue that you have to focus on early on is teaching them authority, and that the parent is the one in authority. I don't think you should ask your child if they want to do something so much. Now, I'm not trying to say that we're rude dictators or something like that, but I don't think... Do you want to go to the bathroom now? You don't need to do that because you're giving them an opportunity to sin. Or do you want to eat this? Or no, you're giving them an opportunity to to rebel, just say, this is what we're eating for dinner. This is what you're going to eat. Or we're going to go and do this. I'm going to go change your diaper. Not, do you want me to change your diaper? When you ask them things, they're going to say no. So then are you going to punish them for rebellion? Well, most of the time not. We just kind of wrestle them into it anyway. But you're creating pathways for their hearts to rebel, and you're teaching them to disobey.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a good thing. Another issue of that is when you begin to correct, is we say, no, don't do that. And then we say, no, don't do that. And then we'll say, do you want me to spank your bottom if you do that? Or do you want to sit in timeout, or whatever it is that you tend to do? And they realize they don't have to obey until they get to whatever that key moment is. And they learn what that key moment is. Yeah. The key moment should be the first thing you say.
Yeah.
You should only say it once. If they don't obey, then there should be a consequence. And the reason is because they need to learn that God created us to submit to Him. If they don't learn to obey you, they will not obey the Father.
Yeah. And another thing is having a unified front between you and your spouse. We had this happen the other day, back to the food thing. I had told my son, no, we're not going to have more grapes. And like I said, it wouldn't be wrong for me to give him some grapes, but I had just decided this can be a teaching moment. No, you can't have grapes. Well, I leave the room and I come back and he's got a bowl of grapes, and I'm like, what happened here?
Yeah.
Well, there was no communication about that. And you know, it wasn't my wife's fault, but having a unified front, saying, no, you can't do this. And because I think you've mentioned before where and this is how it was for me growing up, I would go and ask my mom something, and she would say, something to the effect of, well, make sure it's fine with your dad. And I'd go to my dad and say, hey, mom said I could do this.
Yeah.
Is that okay? And kind of like manipulate the situation to where, so anyway, a unified front is important. I was thinking about in that quote that you read, Doug, earlier, how they're learning, they're throwing off authority at 10 to 12 years old because they've learned that they can, that your word actually isn't final. Your word doesn't mean anything because if I throw a fit or scream and squirm, then I can get my way. I don't remember if it was a Lifeway research stat, but I read somewhere that there's something like an 80% of high school students leave the faith after high school graduation into college.
Those are pretty standard numbers. Said anywhere between 75 and 80% of youth group attenders do not find themselves in a church or in a college ministry after they graduate from high school.
Yeah, and by God's grace, I don't think that's been the case here, at our church. But we're talking broad general stats. And I hadn't connected this dot, but I think it's because of what you read, because they're learning really early that they can throw off authority. And so what does it matter once I graduate high school if I keep going, there's no authority but me? Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the way that authority is ministered matters too, because I think a lot of parents yell and scream, and that I don't think is helpful. And I've been guilty of yelling too. I mean, I think most parents, if not all parents, are guilty of that at some point. Stress, exhaustion, exasperation. And you yell. But a gentle answer turns away wrath. A harsh word stirs up anger. That's true, and even with parenting. And I think children like to make a scene because they know that if they make a scene, then they get what they want. So you have to nip that in the bud by controlling the situation. And a lot of times I found that physically controlling the situation, picking them up, they're throwing a fit in the floor. Don't just let them continue to throw a fit in the floor. Pick them up, hold them tight to the chest, and just what I said to my kids when they were little was no fits, and try to say it calmly, and there's something about the calm. I'm not reacting to your reaction, physically restraining them. They're not able, not in a. I have to be so careful with what we say here. I don't want people.
We don't want to get reported.
I'm not abusing them, but you're not allowing them to flail around. Right. You have to demonstrate, I think, again and again and again, that you are a loving, firm authority.
Yeah.
And the right and happy way of life is when they submit to authority.
Mm-hmm.
And if you demonstrate that the good way is actually the way of obedience, they're going to keep choosing obedience because it makes more sense to them.
Yeah.
But if you choose that happiness is an immediate gratification, that's the way they're going to go. Everything comes down, what are you teaching them by how you react to them? And at first, it's a lot of work, and it's immediate, and it's consistent. But the more you do it on the front end, the easier parenting gets as you go, I think.
And to kind of tie a bow around what you guys have been talking about with authority, for young parents, if we were going to say, like, what is my advice? One of the best things that I think Emily and I were able to do early on in our marriage when we were starting to have kids was we had already decided that church was a priority.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
And what that did is it meant that I was reinforcing Emily's authority even before we had kids, and she was reinforcing my authority. And not only that, but we were introducing this church, and they are also going to have authority over our kids. And it was, so then before Graham and Maeve even show up, we are living in such a way that we're saying, when the kids come along, you're going to have other people who are over authority, and we're going to reinforce them. So when we met a teacher, we'd go to a parent-teacher conference. We'd be like, we are on the teacher's side to together educate you. We are on the church's side to together bring you up and strengthen knowledge of the Lord. And so you kind of teach authority all around, like there are other people's, and you reaffirm those authorities. So Awana leaders, Sunday school classes, pastors and leaders in the church, these were kind of built into that. But it also meant that church was a very high priority. So when the first travel ball schedule rolls out, you're like, oh, I see that all of your games are on Sundays in 3 states over. Of course, we're not going to do that. We're not even going to consider it. And I think that kind of protects almost a family authority. Like you're creating a family authority. Say, like, there are things that our family doesn't do because we so value this time together. And I think that's really important. That's one of the things that really helped us when we went from being surrounded by family here in the U.S. and then we went to the mission field and we had just the 4 of us. It was that, we could see more clearly. We had already built these authority structures into our family. So
that's very good.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, you as parents also have to submit to authority.
Yeah.
Because in your submission, you're like, especially I'm thinking about church elders or pastors rather, you're training your children that, hey, dad also has an authority that's higher than him, that God has placed over him, and I submit to him. Does that make sense?
Like, yeah.
Like
one of the greatest ways I think that a dad in particular can show that to their kids. When you do get upset or you raise your voice or you get angry, you go to that child and you ask for forgiveness because it shows them dad submits to God.
That's
good.
And so I'm going to submit to dad.
That's right.
That's good. Well, guys,
there is
else?
so much that we could talk about. I would highly recommend.
We might come back and revisit this at a later date.
Because I think we're just barely scratching the surface.
Yeah, this has been a flyover.
I don't think that we are providing enough how-tos. Honestly, we probably need to do a Sunday school class on this a couple of times. But the book Shepherding a Child's Heart is really, really helpful. And in that book, he highlights the idea. The goal is to get to the heart. It's the transformation of the heart. You don't want just behavior modification.
That's right.
You want heart transformation. And so when you're correcting, when you're teaching, all of it is, you got to get to the heart. And that book really, really is helpful. It was helpful for Steph and I. And then another one, Age of Opportunity by Paul Tripp, is also very helpful, especially if your kids are at the teen years, understanding how they think and how to interact with them. So both of those books, highly recommend.
Yeah, that's good. Well, why don't we just plan to revisit this sometime later in the year, and we'll talk a little bit more practically, more specific, because this has been a pretty quick flyover of the subject. So, well, thank you for tuning in. Thank you guys for joining us. it's been a good discussion.
Thanks, Chris.
So, all right. Well, yeah. Until next week, enjoy the journey.